All right, so welcome to the chat about BioSand water filters. Today you'll be joining myself and Wayne and David as we chat about them. Wayne's got a great presentation that he's going to do a demonstration for us. But to get started, David is got a great story that he's going to share, kind of one of the origin stories for Friendly Water for the World. And so I'll hand it off to him.
Thank you, Will.
Oh, excuse me. David, can you do the mission and vision while you're there?
Sure. So as we do every week, we share our mission and vision. Our mission is to expand global access to low-cost clean water technologies and information about health and sanitation through knowledge sharing, training, applied research, community building, peacemaking, and efforts of sustainability. And our vision is of healthy, self-sustaining, empowered, peaceful communities, both here and abroad, sharing our knowledge with each other, with life and hope restored through clean water. So the beginning. So I actually shared some of this about 3 weeks ago. In the picture, you see Dell Livingston, Friendly Water's co-founder, along with me, and Suzanne Livingston, also co-founder. And Dell was having his 65th birthday, and his kids sent Dell and Suzanne on a trip to southern Mexico, kind of a Club Med sort of thing, I think. But if you've ever spent time around Dell, you'll know that he can't sit still for more than 10 minutes. And so Suzanne was sitting on the beach, and Dell said, I'm going for a walk, about 9 o'clock in the morning. And he goes for a walk, walks about 5 miles, and comes upon a group of people who, with the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology folks in Canada, are learning to build BioSand water filters. Well, it turns out Dell had heard about them previously, but never actually seen them. Dell is a very handy person, and he spent all 8 hours there. And he told Suzanne what he had seen, and Suzanne said, well, that's fine, but I'm still going to stay on the beach. He went back another day, spent another 8 hours there. And at the end of those 8 hours, the trainers said, you know, if you could stay one more day, we can certify you to do this work. Dell said, sorry, but my plane is leaving tomorrow morning at 10. So they said, all right, hey, someday you'll come up to Canada and you'll finish this. Well, Dell, they went to the airport with all their bags. And as it turned out, on this particular day, America West forgot to send an airplane. No, there wasn't a weather problem. No, the plane wasn't broken. They literally forgot to send an airplane. And they gave him 6 more free days at the resort. So he went back and finished the training. He comes back and is talking with Quakers in Kenya about their bad water situation. And Dell says, well, I can help, but I have to figure out how to get over there. Now, Dell is wonderful with his hands, and he gets along with people famously well, but he's a terrible fundraiser. He goes to his church. He only needs $2,700. He goes to his church, raises about $1,200. Can't find anybody in the U.S. that's interested. But it turns out he's a Quaker from Olympic View Friends Church, and a former member of his church sends him down to see me. Now, I have a reputation as a good fundraiser. I wouldn't know whether that's true or not, except to say I actually like fundraising because I move human energy around where I think it should go. And he comes down. I don't remember a single word of what he said. I certainly did not understand BioSand filters, but he said to me, the feeling of what I got from him was, David, I'm going to save the world, but I need $1,500. When an elderly Quaker comes down and says something like that to you, you essentially have 2 choices. You can find him a nice place in a comfortable mental institution, or you can raise him his $1,500. And I have to tell you, it was easier to raise than $1,500. He went over to Kenya, and the project worked. And from there, I'm going to turn it over to Wayne.
All right. Thank you, David. It's wonderful to see so many familiar faces and some new ones here today. Uh, I got involved with Friendly Water in about 2012. I had heard about it the previous year and got so excited about it that I actually went out and had my own steel mold built. And I downloaded the manual from the cost website and I started making filters because a lot of people around where I live were into preparedness and like Chicken Little, they thought the sky was falling and they wanted to be prepared for whatever disasters might befall where we were living. And I made a few filters and then just kind of put it on the back burner until a year later I went to the training in Anacortes and uh, just wanted to see what I was missing. And since I had experience, I wanted to see, well, Dylan and Suzanne had just gotten back from Kenya a couple of days earlier, and they were suffering a bit from jet lag. And through my experience, my son Noah and I were able to join in and help. And that was the beginning. And I've never looked back. In 2014, David asked me to go to India with him, he and my son, and we conducted a couple trainings there. And that was the beginning of my international travel. And it was so exciting. I turned to David and I said, I could do this all the time. And since then, I think I've conducted about 20 trainings, probably not near as many as some of you there in East Africa, but I'm getting a fair amount of experience and it's just been a wonderful ride for me. So the BioSand filter is a slow sand filter. Uh, they were originally used in Egypt as many as 3,000 or 4,000 years ago. Uh, the BioSand filter was created by Dr. David Manns at the University of Calgary in Canada. He patented the idea and gave it to the world. In 2001, the Center for Affordable Water and Sanitation Technology was formed to do research and development on this product. So that is where Friendly Water gets all its educational resources. They are used in about 66 or more countries now. They are gravity fed and a natural biological process. It mimics the way nature cleans the soil through uh, its natural process of percolating down through the ground and removing impurities. So that is, they remove about 99% of all pathogens. They cost $60 or less most anywhere in the world. I can tell you they can be built for about $12 to $18 in materials, US dollars. They're made from local resources, locally gathered material. They can run for 30 years with a minimal of maintenance, and they produce 23 gallons or up to 84 liters a day of clean water under ideal conditions. You can put much more water through this, but the efficiency rate will be somewhat less. The 23 gallons will be plenty for a family of 12 to 15 people. The design, here, I would like to now show you the actual filter and point out the parts. So this is the BioSand water filter. It's a concrete vessel, a foot square, about 3 feet tall or just short of a meter tall. It has a lid. This one is a tile lid. They can be made of wood or sheet metal, but it's just there to keep out critters and dust and dirt. Inside, you'll have a diffuser plate, and this just makes the water rain down onto the sand so that the bio layer is not disturbed. This one you'll see is galvanized. It has 100 1/8-inch holes or 3 millimeters in diameter. This one inside is made of stainless steel. And what we're finding is the stainless steel is probably a much better product because the galvanized metal tends to rust away in a fairly short amount of time. This would be one of those maintenance items. Now, in some locations, they make a filter basket, and the filter basket hangs on the edge, and you can see there's a little ledge down here inside. This is where the diffuser plate sits, just like that. Way down in the bottom, you may or may not be able to see the plastic tube. It's embedded in the concrete. It comes out here in the nose. It just turns and goes into a catch vessel like this. So those are the physical parts. Over here, we have a plastic model filter. And you can see the layers of filter media in here. In the actual size filter, you will have 2 inches or 5 centimeters of 1/2 inch or 12 millimeter gravel. You'll have 2 more inches of 1/4 inch or 6 millimeter separation gravel, and then 54 millimeters or 21.5 inches of sand that is 0.7 millimeters or less. In the actual size filter, you'll have 2 inches or 5 centimeters of standing water, and this just provides an environment for the biological pathogens, the contaminants that you're pouring in there to live. The water is filtered in 4 ways. There's a mechanical filtration. All the large worms and cysts are mechanically caught in the sand. They cannot get through more than just a little ways into the sand. There is, in the concrete vessel, there is no light and no oxygen more than a few inches into the sand. There's a natural anaerobic die-off. And then as the water circulates through the sand, there is an electrostatic type charge that makes small particles, pathogens like virus, glom onto the sand, and they're forever held there and eliminated in that sand. The last and most important is the biolayer. All the pathogens that you pour into here form an environment, and the dominant species will eventually devour the weaker ones. And Studies have shown that 80% of the virus and bacteria can be eliminated in this very top uh, layer of water and just a little bit into the few centimeters into the sand. So that is the four processes: the biolayer, mechanical trapping, adsorption, the electrical glomming of the small particles, and anaerobic die-off. So those are the four processes. Now I've got a little treat for you here today. I have mixed up a little bit of this purple potassium permanganate, and I'm going to take the filter over, set it here. And we're going to watch that is how the contaminated water, you can see that there's not much purple in this sand at all. And the potassium permanganate, much like pathogens, is eliminated right here. You've got clear water coming out. Cheers. So, um, so Will, shall I launch, go into the tools necessary and everything else? Do we have another step in between?
Yeah, let me just get back to the presentation. So this is what Wayne just walked through: preparing the filter, adding the water to the filter, diffuser plate slowing the filter, then the natural processes killing the pathogens, and then water draining to the bottom, and then pressure forcing the water up the tube and out of the spout. And you just got to see that live. And these are the processes he talked about: the mechanical trapping, the predation, the adsorption, and the natural death through lack of light and oxygen.
Yeah.
Turning that, and this is not the permanganate, this is considerably dirty water, into this.
Yep.
And so these are the construction steps, and we put this up here just because it's good to kind of put this all in one place. If you'd like to come back and watch the video, you can kind of pause at this step and see all the different steps that we go through to actually create one. And then Wayne has put together a lot of the tools that are necessary. So let him kind of share those tools and how that works. Okay, Wayne, all you.
Thank you, Will. So here I have the steel mold. It is one thing that Friendly Water for the World supplies each of our BioSand filter groups with two of. We usually find to a welder that is highly skilled in-country to supply our steel molds. We've got a wonderful steel mold maker down in Dindigul in Tamil Nadu in India and in each of the countries in Africa. And they are building these steel molds, and then we ship them out to our groups that we train. So the components here, this is the face of the steel mold. There's a face plate that keeps the concrete from coming out. I've already got a tube installed. That just is on there. Then we have the inner core, which this is upside down right now. It's ready for the concrete to be poured in. The steps that we go through are a thorough washing with soap and water that's then dried and oiled with a vegetable oil. The tube is placed in here. It's all bolted together. There are 18 bolts that bolt it together. And I've already gone ahead and taped this tube down, and you mix the sand, gravel, and cement in very specific portions. It's 12 liters of coarse gravel, 12 liters of fine gravel, 24 liters of sand that is sifted to 1 millimeter or less, and then 12 liters of cement. You usually mix, depending on how wet the sand is, about 10 liters of water, and it's kind of a stiff mixture, meaning it's not a very wet concrete mixture. And then you just keep pouring cement in here. There's these rubber mallets that we use, and I usually like to have at least 2 people pounding on the outside of the steel mold as it is being filled. This works the air bubbles up through the concrete, and it gives a nice, smooth, leak-free finish to it. When the cement is just below this plate, we wipe this off, tape the tubing down at that point, oil this again, and finish filling it to the top. Once this is filled and smooth, then you continue to pound until all the air bubbles are gone, usually about 15 to 20 minutes after the filter is full, and then you let it sit. You let it sit for 30 to 45 minutes, depending on the amount of the sunlight and the heat involved. So, and then you take a trawl and you chop the edges. This integrates the concrete here once again, so that there is no cracking around the base of the filter. The filter then is turned over after 24 hours of curing. There's a gear type extractor that is put on, and you pull the center core out, and then it is unbolted, the faceplate comes off, and the outside shell is removed. You fill the filter with water at that point. You check the flow rate. Then it is left full of water for a period of 5 to 7 days, so that the concrete cures slowly. At that point, it can be washed with soap and water. The exterior can be painted, and the sand and gravel is for the filter media is sifted and washed, and the whole thing goes to where it will be installed, and it was all set up there. The filters are not intended to ever be moved once the filter media is filled. So that is just a brief explanation of the filter building process. When we do our trainings, it is a process that'll take, oh, we go through this at least 3 times. So you'll end up doing this over a 5-day period. So I can't stand here and make you experts all at once. Um, these are the sifters that we use. It's the 12 millimeter or half-inch screen, the 6 millimeter or quarter-inch screen, the 1 millimeter screen, and the 0.7 millimeter, which is the one that is used for filter media. Over here, we have all the tools necessary to build the filter. You've got shovels and buckets, hand tools, files. I'm sure many of you will remember from some of the trainings I have done, the container for the bolts. I assign one person in each group to be the bolt police, because you don't want to be in a very remote area and lose one of your bolts. So that person in charge of that job makes sure all the bolts go in the container. They make sure all the bolts are tight before the filters, the steel mold is filled with concrete. So you have trowels for smoothing the concrete and doing the integration at the end, a saw and hammer for building the sieves. I know in many cases I've hired a local carpenter to do this job. It's something that is simple for them, and it's just seems to make economic sense for most people. This is a tool that Bill Livingston taught me to make. I think this is actually one that he made himself. And if a BioSand filter is not regularly maintained, you need to feed this BioSand filter at least every 2 days, preferably at least once a day. Run a batch through. If it sits for a couple weeks, it's hot, it's dry, the water can evaporate and it'll sink down into the sand. And if you pour water in from the top, it can actually form rivers through the sand, and it will bypass all the filtration. So you use this tool to backfill. You get the cleanest water you can. You attach this to the bottom, and then hold this, it's basically a funnel, and keep filling until the water rises back up through the sand. Nice clear water. Okay. I hope that provides you with a little bit of an overview. I'll go back inside now, and I'd like to talk just a couple more minutes about how we do our training.
That'd be great. And while Wayne is moving back inside, I will just show some pictures of, actually many of these are, I think all of them are actually recent BioSand water constructions from the general Lucknow area. We had a training in Lucknow towards the end of last year, and several of the groups have then been led by Benjamin Christie, a representative of ours near Lucknow, have been building their own filters. He's been going to each of the groups and each of the sites. And as you can see, these are just some of the steps from some of the different groups, from oiling and cleaning the filters to the sand sifting and the filling. I was I was actually excited to see a picture of the tube getting cut. I've never actually seen that live before, so that's the only picture I have of it. It's a small thing to get excited about, but I was really happy to get one. And then you can see them tapping the filter so that the air bubbles get up through the top, and then slowly pulling it out. And we actually have a great picture I don't include here of some ingenuity by one of these groups where they used a nearby tree to hoist the filter out of the mold, which is a great idea. And then you can see the pictures of the finished filters. And these groups have really been doing amazing work, helping their communities around Lucknow and northern India. So hopefully Wayne is back. And actually, this is one of the groups from the training, getting their certificates. And I think Wayne is set to talk a little more about what a training for BioSand water filters looks like.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we have recently changed some of the ways in which we operate. Before we would find out about an interested group, we would find out a little bit about them, and if we possibly could arrange a training in which we would supply all these tools and materials free of cost, but retain ownership of the tools with a memorandum of understanding that if they're still being used, they're free to use them. But if they're at all sitting idle, we would have the opportunity to take those back and use them with a group that that can be productive with them. We have come to the conclusion that we need more efficacy in our work. So we are now first putting out a community engagement survey. We're trying to find out a little bit about the community we're going into. That will be followed, number 2, by an independent nonprofit in that area who will conduct maybe a 2 or 3 day full-scale community engagement process in which we will interview the trainees. We will find out who in the community are those in power and influence who can help us promote this. And then we will determine who will keep the ongoing engagement going. At that time, there's a community coach or a coach selected that will be part of the training, but also report on a weekly basis to Friendly Water staff so that we may provide technical assistance to the group and encouragement to help their success. And in doing so, we feel that this should increase our success rate and then from there, we would like to build concentric rings around that village in development over a long periods, maybe such as 3 to 5 years, and move forward in a very slow and deliberate way that way. So that is kind of how we're headed in that direction, and we hope to get much more success in this way.
So I'm going to, thanks Wayne. I'm going to switch back here to the presentation, and I'm actually going to ask David, if he wouldn't mind unmuting. I'm going to put David on the spot, and I just ask him to talk about some of the outcomes that the communities should expect to experience by having the BioSand water filters installed. And David, I need to unmute you. There we go.
Hello?
There we
Everyone
go.
hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So there are both direct and indirect impacts of setting up a BioSand program within the community. The short-term effect, the immediate impact, is to eliminate cholera, typhoid, E. coli, salmonella, shigella, hepatitis A, other diarrheal diseases within the community. We actually have a community in Congo where 26 women demanded to be trained. They actually showed up at a training, and we didn't, they weren't invited. We didn't know they were coming, and we discovered that they had, among these 26 women, they had 18 dead children from cholera in the previous year. And they just showed up and demanded to be training. And we've now pretty much, I'm waiting for the full report, but pretty much eliminated cholera in that community. Second thing that it does, again with kids, I'm talking about kids under 5, it eliminates parasitic stress, energy from food that should be going into building brains as well as bodies. It's going into fighting off parasitic diseases. And when it does that, especially between 6 months of age and 30 months of age, as Peter Jensen has talked about in a previous talk, you get permanent stunting and permanent cognitive damage. In India, it is estimated that 21% of kids today have permanent cognitive damage as a result of bad water. It's called the largest brain drain in the history of the world, happening in India right now. We can stop that. Third thing I want to talk about is, besides better health, many families are spending large parts of their income on health expenses. Getting to clinics, even if the clinic is free, or paying for clinics. Pharmaceuticals, which will play a major role, make a major dent in people's budgets. It's one of the interesting things is people say, well, can poor people afford the filters? And to my way of thinking, poor people can actually afford the filters more than rich people. And the reason is, in some of the places we work, people will be spending half their income, very low incomes, on waterborne illnesses, the impacts of waterborne illnesses. Those impacts include, by the way, paying for funerals. And you put down, our studies have been showing that if you put down $50 for a filter, $30 for a filter, doesn't really matter how much, you can save $250 to $300 a year, up to $500 a year in medical expenses. So if anyone wants to get a 5 to 10 time return on their money, it would be poor people. So oddly enough, the filters are actually more affordable if you think about it overall, for poor people than it is for rich people, who will get a more marginal economic impact. Sometimes what will happen is people have water that's close to their home and school, but it's not drinkable. I know of a school situation in Tanzania. They had a contaminated well right next to the school, but they couldn't use the water. So they were spending school fees on either buying water or sending people out long distances, 5 and 6 kilometers, to gather water for the school. Now they're able to use the water from the contaminated well. It was with microorganisms that were poisoning the well, and that was easily dealt with at the school. And now the school has a regular supply of clean water. So those people are no longer walking for water. The kids are in school and they're getting clean water, and they bring containers from home. And at the end of the day, they will have full containers of clean water to bring home to their families. So this is just a list of some of the significant impacts. The last one is when things work. I mean, this happens whether we're able to sell a single filter or not. I mean, if just the people trained get filters, these things happen. If we can set up programs whereby people are able to sell filters effectively, we produce more in the way of employment. We raise family incomes, in which case there's better nutrition in the communities, more funds for school fees, more money available for school fees, and the like. To me, the biggest impact of all, those are all part of the bundle, but the biggest gain of all is the community's ability to plan. You know, if you know that one of your 4 children is going to die before the age of 5, and that's going to be true of all the people around you, and you know that 30–40% of your income is going to be going to pharmaceuticals that whole time, and you know you're going to be going to funerals that whole time, and life is so difficult because of constant disease and threat of disease in your family, it's not a good use of mental energy to plan. And so people don't do, the people will live hand to mouth and they don't do good planning of their lives. It's kind of like, instead of talking about PTSD, post-traumatic stress syndrome, they have trauma syndrome. They have constant trauma in their lives. And this is one of the ways to eliminate it and give people the possibility in their lives so that they can plan.
Thank you. Thanks. I put you on the spot there, but I knew you would know this better than anybody else. So that wraps up the presentation and part of it. We actually are done before 1 o'clock, I think, for the first time since we've been doing this. So or the second time perhaps. So we have some time to for Q&A, some extra time for Q&A. So if anybody has questions or anybody wants to contribute to something that they've heard or add to it, that would be great. Feel free to speak up. I can unmute folks. You feel free to mute yourself back or raise your hand or share anything you'd like to share. Any takers?
I have a question.
Sure, Carl.
Are these usually used by single families, or is it usually a group of families that gets one and then they share it?
Wayne, do you want to answer that?
It's both. The filters will provide enough clean water to 12 to 15. Many of them share with the neighbors. 2 or 3 families will share one filter.
One of our first projects was in Burundi, among people who had experienced the genocide there. And as part of a peacemaking plan, we would pair up one Hutu family with one Tutsi family to share water.
Other questions? Kathy?
Yeah. If things go well with returning health and everything, will Friendly Water plan another Anacortes training this summer?
We currently have canceled our training for this year. I'm not sure if Kurt is still on the line and if he'd like to give more of a definitive answer to that. But the last I had seen, we had canceled our training for this year. Or at least the time we would typically do one. And I believe we're discussing what comes next. So Kurt, if you'd like to add anything to that, please feel free to do so.
No, that's pretty much it. We don't have confidence in the relapse of or lack of relapse into coronavirus coming this fall. We're going to try to maintain social distancing in everything we do, probably through the extent of the summer. We have also been giving thought to moving our training down here so that we can conduct more technologies at the same time. So I think we're going to actually use the gap this year as a way to reconstruct the way we're going to be doing our trainings in the future, and we hope to roll out something that will really represent the work that we're doing and the full spectrum of all 7 technologies perhaps, and different types of trainings for people with different types of schedules. And we'd like to be able to do that for 2021.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kurt. Any other questions or comments or thoughts or? Oh, Clements?
Yes, could we recommend that this be used in rural United States?
David, I think that's do you want to expound on that, David? Can't hear you. You'll have to unmute yourself.
The answer to that is yes, provided the problem is microbial. I mean, remember, it's got to be a microbial problem. You know, that's what they're designed to do. For example, while they take out some level of lead, we wouldn't recommend them for a situation like Flint. But yes, they can be used in rural areas. We have actually some people who are using them in rural areas. Somewhat sub rosa. Public health departments may not like them, but if you don't have a connection to a municipal water system, they certainly can be used in a rural situation.
Can they be used to remove arsenic?
Yes, yes. The method to removing arsenic is so simple. It's almost embarrassing. What you do is you take 4.5 kilograms of rusty nails, non-galvanized nails. You put them in cheesecloth. You set the cheesecloth on top of the diffuser plate or in the diffuser box. When the water flows through them, I'm not going to go through the entire chemical process, but essentially the iron changes. The iron oxide becomes arsenic oxide. The iron flows through the filter. The arsenic is bound hard to the nails themselves. It should last for about 2 years. You would then take out the nails, bury them carefully in the ground, and put some new nails in. And our former administrative director spent almost a year in the lab proving that you could remove up to 99.58% of arsenic occurring at 2,500 times the concentration that naturally occurs on Earth. So yes, and we are actually looking possibly at some programs in Bihar or West Bengal where there are high levels of arsenic where this could do the trick.
That's great.
Connie? Oops, sorry.
No. Other questions and comments?
Yes, I'm happy to have Wayne's presentation because it was a nice refresher for me. And also that there have been a few changes, a few modifications in the last 2 or 3 years since I went through the training. So I'm glad to catch up on that. And it sounds like we'll also be able to refresh ourselves by reviewing what Wayne presented today later, if we'd like to do that. Is that right, Will?
That's right. The video will be on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it and pause it at parts if you want to take notes and look at this beautiful face for as long as you want to during the day. So.
All right, that sounds good. Thank you.
Who else has a question or a comment?
I have a question. This is Curly.
Hi, please go ahead.
Yeah, how can you tell when it's in the field if it's not working?
That's a good question. Wayne, do you want to talk about that?
Well, usually if it's not working, the flow rate will be slowed down. The only real maintenance to these filters is that over time, that bio layer builds up so thick that it slows down the flow rate. And at that point, you remove the diffuser plate, you reach in and just slightly disturb the very top layer of sand and get that, the muck, that's the slime that's on top of the sand, up in the 2 inches of water. And you take a cup or other device and bail out that water. It restores the flow rate, and that's really the only maintenance that needs to be done. There's been long-term research that shows that the sand should not even need to be changed for as much as 30 years or more. So that's the data that we get from cost. I'm sure if there were any other physical adversities of the diary returns significantly, you may have to address an issue then, but I have not heard of that.
I think it also speaks to the importance of the sand itself. You can't use just any sand. It has to be sand from high riverbanks, and it has to, or other like areas. And it also has to be, as Wayne said, of a very specific size. And so that's a critical element of it.
And washed to a very specific clarity.
Are there questions? Okay. Well, I want to thank, it's 1 o'clock. We finished on time for the first time ever. All of you should pat yourselves on the back. You did very well. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation. Thanks to Wayne. That was really fantastic. It's the first time we've been able to have that live. It was really neat. It's great to see it in action. Hopefully in the future, we'll be able to record some of our actual trainings. And so folks can see that on video as well. That would be really neat. Again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to me. Next week, I'm going to keep it a surprise because it hasn't been completely decided what we're going to be talking about. But we will be online next week at noon, next Friday at noon, and we'll be sending out an invitation for that shortly. Thanks everybody for joining. I hope, please stay safe. Please take care of yourselves. I like the fact that folks are using physical distancing instead of social distancing. It's really important during this time to stay connected to people in some way, shape, or form. So I hope you're all able to do that, and I hope this also helps in doing that. So David, do you have some final comments?
Well, only that, like all nonprofit organizations, this is a difficult time for us. We're trying to keep our heads above water. I think that's an interesting pun, given that we're friendly water for the world. Contributions are very welcome to us, especially at this time. And we'd love to have monthly sustainers. I mean, the way we can keep Wayne and Will working is being able to pay them. And we really want to keep them working. We have no current plans to furlough anybody, but monthly donations allow us to keep the wheels turning.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
I've got to feed mittens and fluffers here, so please help. All right. Well, thanks everyone for joining again. I hope everyone has a fantastic weekend, and take care of yourselves.